We have a special guest today, a gentleman named Howard Behar, who was the former president of Starbucks. And he has a great book out, Not About the Coffee. And Howard, we couldn't thank you enough for joining us. Greatly appreciate your time and looking forward to your wisdom. And thanks so much again for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. First of all, I'm a big time Husky fan. Football, my favorite sport. Sorry, basketball coaches. So great to be part of this today. If I could say this, that, sports are just like any other organization. They're really driven by the leader's values and how that leader expresses those values and how that leader makes decisions in whatever they do. And each team or each organization or each school has its own culture. And each one kind of, is driven by the people that lead the organization and in your case, the teams that you coach. And that was exactly the same way at Starbucks. There was no different. We had a much bigger organization than most of you have. We had 500,000 people around the world representing Starbucks in stores or in wholesale or whatever. Those values are critical that they are defined. You can't just assume everybody knows. And as a matter of fact, I would assume that probably most of you haven't even written down what your values are, your 8 to 10 core values that drive your life in all aspects of your life, because there shouldn't be any difference between what you do when you're coaching and what you do at home. The same person should show up in either place. And the same person, it should be represented by the same values in either place. And I think it's one of the critical elements of really leading a fulfilling life and really leading a good life. So written down values, the values defined by what they mean to you and how you'd practice them. If one of your core values was honesty, we might go around this room here and you might all say you're honest, but you might have a completely different definition of what that value might mean to you. What would you tell a white lie about? So your organizations need to understand who you are and what you represent, and your actions need to match those core values. And that's how we tried to lead Starbucks. Were we perfect? No. Just like every other organization, we were imperfect. We didn't always get it done correctly, but we always had mechanisms to get us back on board. And our people could always depend that their leadership would listen and try to do the right thing. Not necessarily do it, but at least try to do the right thing.
Howard, one of the things that you talk about is, and be curious if you could just maybe start with this, you have the person who sweeps the floor should choose the broom.
Yeah. Well, what that really represents is that you go out and you bring great people onto your staff, onto your teams or into your organization, and you got to give them the opportunity to make decisions, particularly around their areas of expertise, and even sometimes not around their areas of expertise. You should give them an opportunity to give input, because it's amazing what can come from people that don't have a lot of experience in a given area if you just listen to them. And so at Starbucks, we tried to do that, and we found that it was very successful. All of you know probably all of you know the product Frappuccino. That came from a district manager in Southern California that actually saw a similar product in a competitor store, and she kept pitching leadership that we should do something like it. And there was great pushback on part of the people that were in charge of product development. They said, no, we're in the coffee business. We're not in that kind of business. And so I stepped in and I said, okay, we're going to take a risk. And we actually did it without anybody knowing about it. It was in Southern California. And we put it on our menu board, and what everybody thought was going to be a little deal turned into a $4 billion business. And at one time it represented 20% of our sales. And it all came about because that person, that district manager, she wasn't in charge of product development, but she was aware of what was going on in her market. And we need to be able to trust her when she said, this is something we need to look at. And all too often in leadership positions, we don't do that. If a person is sweeping the floor in your organization, they come and say, gee, I found a fantastic broom on the internet the other day, and I think it can increase floor sweeping productivity by 15 or 20%. You know how many leaders would say, just use the broom we gave you? And particularly the purchasing department, they'd tell you, hey, we only buy one broom. But all too often we lose the opportunity for great ideas.
Or how about scaling leadership? Scaling leadership is something that's always going to be a challenge. So you talk about things about servant leadership or being a good listener. And I can only imagine, running a company like Starbucks, how do you know that your district managers or your store managers in the middle of the country are executing the vision and the values you want when you're running a company the size of Starbucks? How do you know that the people at the lowest levels are executing your vision?
Well, number one, you got to inspect what you expect. You can give people responsibility, but you better be helping them out, particularly in the early days, until you know what you have. And that doesn't mean you control what they do, but you're around them and you see what they do, and then you coach them just like you do with your players. And you don't wait till the end of the season to coach them, do you? You're coaching all the time. You're coaching in the moment, because when something's gone well, you want to pat them on the back and say, "Atta boy" or "Atta girl." And when something's not going so well, you want to pull them aside and say, "Hey, we could have done something different here." And so you have to inspect what you expect, first of all. Then, you have to make sure that you're communicating often about what matters in the organization. Too often leaders get tired of their message long before the people that are in the organization get tired of the message. I had one speech that I gave probably, I don't know how many thousands of times. And it was about that we weren't in the coffee business serving people, but we were in the people business serving coffee, and what that meant at Starbucks. And I just kept pounding it to death. I never got tired of talking about it because it was what was important at Starbucks. It didn't mean that coffee wasn't important, but it was the people that were important at Starbucks. It was the people that drove the business. Anybody could go out and buy coffee and roast coffee, but it took special people to bring a place like Starbucks alive. And so then you had to set up your reward and recognition structures inside your organization to reward people for the things that supported the culture of the organization. And after a while, people see what you're rewarding for, and they want to repeat that. I don't know if any of you have read a very old book. It's called The 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard. And it's an important book because it talks about the fact that you try to catch people doing things right, not doing things wrong. Because people by nature gravitate towards when they do things, when they're rewarded for something they've done right, they want to repeat that. They want that feeling again of doing something right. They move away from that which causes them pain, and they start not wanting to take risks. So I'll give you an example. So this was a blowout that Howard Schultz and I had. We had a woman that was running our East Coast, and she was a regional vice president. And early on the internet, she decided she wanted to put a coupon on the internet to give away a cup of coffee free with something. I can't even remember what it was. So she passed it through all the right people. She went to the marketing people and said, "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea." So she went ahead and did it. What she didn't understand, what none of us understood, that on the internet, anybody could copy the coupon. So all of a sudden we went from thinking we were going to give away 10,000 coupons to 1 million. Well, you imagine what the cost was. Howard Schultz went ballistic. I mean, he called her up on a Friday night and he just reamed her from one end to the other. Now, what do you think happened? What do you think message that sent? See, all she was trying to do was increase business. She wasn't trying to hurt the team or hurt the company, but none of us recognized it and she didn't. And so rather than her thanking her for the effort she put out and talking to her about what she could have done next to make sure that didn't happen again, right? He destroyed her. And it was one of the biggest blowouts Howard and I have ever had. On Saturday, I called him up and I did what he had done to the person. I said, "You know what you just did? You put us back 5 years from people being willing to take risks." And so, mistakes are going to happen, right? As you all know. And so it's better to reward people, catch people doing the right things right or doing things right than always catching them doing things wrong, because they want to repeat the things that are right. So it's inspect what you expect, reward and recognition and penalties matter, and then constantly repeat your message. to everybody in the organization, from the water boy to the, what, I don't care what the position in the organization is, to the people that are selling the tickets. Everybody needs to be on board. Period. Not just your team, but everybody on the board. So that message travels throughout.
What's the one thing you wish you knew the day you started as the president of Starbucks that you didn't learn until the end through experience?
Well, I had the opportunity to start Starbucks International, which was basically to take Starbucks outside of North America. So I had never been on the sell side in an international. I'd always been on the buy side. So, starting a business from scratch, basically taking it outside of North America, I opened stores, or with the team opened stores in 57 different countries. You had to learn. We weren't an expert at the culture in each of those countries, but you better know something about those cultures. And you better know what makes the people in those cultures as a whole tick. And so I had to be a student of those cultures, and I had to learn. And I was impatient at the beginning. I was, I was constantly bitching. Why is it taking so long for us to get a store open in Japan? Well, Japan has a lot of unwritten rules. I didn't like them. The fact are, I wasn't going to be able to change them. And I had to learn how to deal with them. And I finally figured out I had to be the best at it. I had to be the best at each individual country of how to get our stores open. I had to be better than the locals were. And I came out of that experience understanding something that, we're all the same. We are all the same. Everybody wants to love and be loved. Everyone wants to grow as a human being. Everybody wants to contribute. Everybody wants more for their families and for themselves. And everybody wants to feel they're part of something bigger than themselves. Didn't make any difference what food they ate, what religion they practiced, what color their skin, or where they came from. It was all the same. And that's what I came away learning. And I wish I'd have known that at the beginning. And I wish I'd have been a lot more patient at the beginning. It'd save myself a lot of headaches.
Howard, I just wonder, within a culture like Starbucks, which is obviously enormous, how do you find the ways to create those conversations with people so that people feel like their message can be heard from bottom to top and sideways and all around?
Well, it required open communication. It required, the regional VPs, the district managers, they got rewarded for their open communication. Right? They got recognized for how they treated their people. And so you had to drive it through the organization. I mean, I couldn't talk to 500,000 people.
Right.
I've talked to 100,000 people lately on Zoom, amazingly. But in those days, we couldn't do that. So we had to talk to everybody in the organization, and we had to talk about the messages that we wanted out there. And then we had to treat those people like we wanted them to treat their people. And then when we found that something wasn't going the way that it needed to be going, we had to have open and honest conversations, but with love in our hearts, right? We had to care about them, even though we were coaching them, and trying to help them to be better. We had to do it with love in our hearts, but still be direct, because performance mattered at Starbucks. It wasn't this soft, mushy place. We had to produce results. And if we didn't, we weren't going to be there. But profit was the final thing on our guiding principles. Treating people with respect and dignity was number one. And that drove profits. How we treated each other was number one. You all know, I watch all the football games. I'm always amazed at the faces on coaches when something has gone wrong and how they start screaming at the players. And I'm thinking to myself, what is it they don't understand about human beings and how human beings react? All people. Now, you may have some players on your team that love to have the shit beat out of them emotionally, but is that really what you want? I don't think so. I think it's ineffective.
Howard, you had mentioned a couple of decisions that you had made early on in the conversation. It was the decision to go with Frappuccinos.
Yeah.
Then you mentioned some decisions you had to make, which were costly with COVID. Yeah. Do you have a process, or are there certain things you do when you have to make big decisions?
Yeah. The first thing you ask yourself, how does it affect our people? How does it affect our people? All of our people. So before you make that decision, what's going to happen? It's you have to do it in the context of the big people, but the people that work in the organization, number one. Then number two, how does it affect our communities in which we operate? And then number three, how does it affect our other stakeholders, our shareholders, et cetera? But number one, the most weight has to go to how does it affect our people? And that's how we made decisions. And we always understood that if we didn't have the commitment of our people, we had nothing. If our people on the whole didn't serve you well, and I know we're not perfect, but didn't serve you well, you wouldn't go back. And the reason they don't serve you well is because we weren't treating them well for the most part, or they didn't feel like they were being treated well.
Who did you bring into the room on certain decisions?
Oh, we brought all the people that had some kind of, we didn't bring shareholders into the room, but we brought, particularly on people decisions, we'd bring baristas into the room. We'd bring store managers into the room. We'd bring all levels of people because you never know what input you're going to get. I remember I wanted early on, we give a pound of coffee a week for free. Most of that coffee gets given away to a friend or something, doesn't get consumed by the people that take it. And I thought, God, we could save a lot of money by cutting it down to a half a pound a week. You'd still get free coffee, but a half a pound a week. But I didn't know. So I went out just like I always did. And I got teams together of store managers, of baristas, regional people. And I said, here's what I'm thinking. Here's the money it would save. And we got such pushback, particularly from the field organization, of how important it was emotionally for that pound, that by taking it away, it would have been detrimental to our overall team atmosphere, and detrimental, I think, overall to our business. So I backed away from it because that's the input I got. Now, I can't always do everything, couldn't always do everything that, people wanted because it was just, there were so many things coming at you all the time. But the important stuff we could do. And when I was unsure about something, that's where I would go. And it was amazing the kind of great input I would get.
This has really been remarkable. We can't thank you enough for your time and your wisdom and, your generosity for us to follow up with you. And I know you made a lot of us better, and just really greatly appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you for giving me a life of joy, right? I mean it. It's for those of you that, are out there busting your bun every day, trying to make these kids better and trying to do something good for your schools. Thank you. And particularly for the ones that have been associated with University of Washington, I really thank you.